All right, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. The first thing is the pledge in mindfulness moment, but I don't see a flag anywhere. And so I think we'll pass on the flag for now, and we'll just take a mindfulness moment. All right, and I'm looking at the wrong agenda. So, okay. All right, so moving on to additions and deletions from the agenda, we will be adding in under current business. We'll put in there a update on.
Title VI.
I'm sorry?
Update on Title VI.
Update on Title VI.
Are those our packet? I'll get them to you
Okay.
when
I don't have, okay.
they're fully prepared. I'll get them to you at the right time.
So we'll make that 4.4. And we are recording, correct?
We are.
Excellent. So Title 6 update. Even though that's going to be 4.4, we're going to take that out of order and make that the first thing, if that's okay with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other additions or deletions to the agenda? All right, a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Motion by Alice, is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Ian. All discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving on to current business. We're taking 4.4 out of order for a Title I update, or Title VI.
Title VI update, yes. So on Friday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I can't believe I was still reading my memos from the agency at that time, but we received an email from Secretary Saunders asking school districts to review and sign an assurance related to Title VI by this Thursday afternoon, or the federal government. It was requested by the federal government, and if we do not sign the assurance, the idea was that we were not going to receive, as a state, the Title I funds. So since that time, I want you to know that there's been a lot of activity, and I'm sure some of you have also received emails. I would encourage you to ask people to directly. But tomorrow, all of the associations, as well as some of the attorneys, one already working with the school district, will be meeting with Secretary Saunders to see if we can have the Agency of Education sign the assurance for the state of Vermont. And we believe that is necessary because this is a conversation that needs to happen in each of the communities. And to be honest with you, that's not going to happen between now and Thursday. I believe that we will be able to get through this without discussing all of the details. It is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's some language in there, and at this point, I'm going to recommend that the board sit tight until I have further information that I can share with you before any action is taken.
Do you know how much money we're receiving in Title VI?
Title I, Title VI is what we have to comply with, but the district receives over $1 million in our consolidated federal grant. I don't know what the allocation is just for that title, but the full consolidated federal grant is over $1 million, and for the state, it would be devastating.
And I spoke to you before the meeting, and this is not a problem for our district that we're aware of, but just wanted to give people an update of what's happening. Emily?
Just to clarify, what do you mean when you say this is not a problem for our district?
We're not violating Title VI, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. the BUSD isn't. Jeff?
So there was some discussion at school today, at the very end of the day, and the position that some of our leadership at our school was talking about is that if we sign the assurance now as a district, or if our superintendent does, there's some things that are shifting language-wise for Title VI. So if we sign it now and it changes, there are some real scary language changes that might be going in there. So encouraging Zoe Saunders to sign it for our state. I'm not quite sure if I heard you correct. Joanne, was that you?
That is one of the recommendations that will be discussed. I don't want to get too deep into this, to be honest with you, because I want to be able to give you accurate information. This just came out on Friday. I haven't had a chance to really process it. I did see a letter that the state of New York sent in response to this, so I think that gives you a little bit of information. So I'm asking board members, let's sit tight and figure this out, and we will get there. We're not taking a position at this point.
Okay. I do believe New York and Massachusetts and Maine are also taking positions as models. So just throwing that out there as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know. Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
Michael,
Yes.
Can I just add that over the years, it has not been unusual for the Agency of Education to sign assurances for any money that has come into the state. It's just done as part of the grant application. For example, over the years, we get something, or the AOE gets something called the Staff Development SPDG, but it's a staff development grant. First 5 pages of that are all assurances that you're going to meet all the federal laws. Same with the IDEA funding. In order to, when you send back your budget, you have to send in the assurance. So I'm just a little bit confused as to why they're asking now for every district, when for decades it has been that the agency or Department of Education or whatever their education at the state level always signs for the state. And then the state, if someone is violating, the state deals with it.
I'm not sure. I did look at the document, and like I said, it says you have to be in violation of the law. So just don't violate the law. All right. Moving on. The VOIP recommendation approval, and that is for phone system. And I don't think I have the action memo in front of me.
I'm hoping the action memo had enough information for you I wasn't gonna have them regurgitate that again. If you have questions for Mike and Jamie, please, that's what we're here for.
Emily?
I would make a motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation to enter into a 3-year contract with Broad Voice for phone services.
All right, motion's on the table. Is there a second?
I'd second that.
Seconded by Alice. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Moving on to board retreat, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mike,
Yeah,
I
we're
think there's
missing,
one more thing.
yeah. The storm order.
Yeah,
Ah,
Jamie, could you come to the table over here, please?
Yeah.
For
Thanks.
some reason, I don't have that.
It's
on.
addendum.
I don't have it on my-
So I don't think we have it on our warned agenda, which we didn't add it to. Maybe it was in the second warning. That's okay.
So I believe it was in the addendum for the briefing memo. This is regarding the Berry Town stormwater project.
Right.
Regulatory approval from the folks.
Yep, for
So
26,000.
Don't want to spend a lot of extra time explaining it, but without questions.
No, it was 26,000 going, who was the vendor again?
Okay, about
Fellows. Okay, thank you. So is there a motion to approve the recommendation for 26,000? You got it right there?
I would make a motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation to use K. Bellavance Landworks for stormwater project at BT MES. BUUSD share is 10%. the board approves $26,995 to be paid from the capital improvement fund.
Second.
Seconded by Jackie, discussion,
I have a question.
Alice?
On previous work that we've done with this company, we've gotten their amount and then it expands. We're really gonna stick with this number and they're gonna stay with that?
I can't say there's not any unforeseen circumstances when say, get to digging. I can't promise you that. I can't give you that.
However, if the scope of the work changes, Alice, we will come back to the board to let you know.
Okay, because I'm just concerned about that because I think one of them really almost tripled from what their original estimate was. So I just have a little ill at ease about whether or not they've got their estimate under control.
Right. Yeah, and this is not the place to get back into an old project and old monies.
No, but it's just,
Totally separate.
right, but it's
But same thing.
the style of what this that I'm asking about, not the old project.
Sure. Yeah, it's not fair enough.
All right, Emily?
I think just to build on Alice's concern and point that old project wasn't under a bid, it was just kind of happening as things evolved, and I think that was the fluctuation in price. We hadn't really come up with a contract yet, so it was still an ongoing project and the cost did mount, but there was no like bid or contract in that project. So this project feels different than that.
All right,
Just
Jackie?
to reiterate, this is a bid, right? So this is under contract?
Correct.
Okay, so basically, if they want to charge more, the onus would be on them to prove that it was outside of anything they could foresee.
Right. And as Jim Wayne said, it would come to the board for.
Yeah, and then we'd have to, okay.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Now we're moving on to the board.
All right.
Thank you.
So,
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.
For some reason, all my stuff is not working properly, so.
Really fast.
So I think the rest of the meeting is board retreat type of work. And I want to start out by just talking a little bit about what I propose for goals for this time based on the feedback that you provided via survey and through Joanne. And then we'll get into the work.
Mr. Chairman, could we introduce our consultants so people who are at home and people who might be looking at this after the fact will know who this fine woman is?
This is Tracy Wren. She works for the SBA as a consultant, and she also helped us secure our current superintendent last year. And she has a strong history in education, as she was a superintendent before taking on a consultant position. And what else would you like me to say?
Well, I'm impressed that you remember all of that. Yeah. Yes, my background is as an educator, from a special educator to a building level leader to a district student services coordinator, principal and superintendent. And for the last 4 years, I've continued to serve public education as a consultant and coach. And I have worked with Barry in the past in the superintendent search and doing a little bit of board retreat work. And I'm excited to be back with you. So thank you. Thank you for catching that, by the way. Even though there are new members to the board, I feel like I know you. But we'll learn more about each other throughout the evening. So I have a lot of notes because there are a lot of things I want to say. So I apologize if I'm looking at them and not at you. But as we get into the work, you'll be doing more of the talking and I'll be looking less at my notes. The goal for this time is to establish the foundation for an annual work plan for the board for the 25-26 school year, for the upcoming school year. And to do that, my proposal is that we review the district quality standards framework, which we touched on in the past, but it will be new to some people. And I bet it's not fresh in the minds of everybody on the board, even if we reviewed it together in the past. I'd like to spend some time doing an overview of key points in areas of statute and regulation that relate to open meeting law, public records requests or FOIA, and Robert's rules. I'd like to support you with reflecting on your working agreements, including your meeting norms and board superintendent roles and responsibilities, and including your working agreements, and by brainstorming some possible next steps for where you might go from here. I want to say that you identified a list of goals that is broader than that. And when I looked at your survey feedback, you all rated all of the things on the list equally high. So definitely more than we can accomplish in 3 hours. But again, my hope is that we strengthen the foundation that you already have so that you can continue to work together in the future to focus more on goals and a work plan. So tonight is the how, with potential future being the what of your work together in the coming school year. I just want to acknowledge that the list included roles and responsibilities and teamwork, including how you work through disagreements between and among board members and with your superintendent, working agreements with the superintendent for handling complaints and a board spokesperson, committees, Robert's rules, FOIA or public records. FOIA stands for Freedom of Information Act, for those who don't know that jargon, open meeting law and public comment, goal setting and strategic planning, a legislative review, including governance options and proposed changes to governance was on your list, strategies for improved effectiveness and efficiency. So basically what should BUUSD do to improve outcomes and responsibly manage costs in a way that's respectful of the impact on taxpayers to the extent you can control or influence that. And there were some individual suggestions around more understanding of the legal parameters for how school systems must operate in Vermont, as well as topics like wellness and facilities. So again, my goal for you today is to focus on how you work together as a foundation for deeper dives into how you might continue board development in the areas that you identify as priorities for continued growth and learning, and to set you up so that you're ready to do some reflection and some goal setting that leads to strategic planning for the long term and annual goal setting to get you where you want to go over a longer period of time. I want to plant a seed for you with regard to how that might look, and then set that aside, and we can come back to that at the end of the meeting. I see you potentially having 4 options for strategic planning. It's actually 2 sets of 2 options. And they start from thinking about your current strategic plan. You have a strategic plan that I estimate was developed in 1819 and was
No. 1819?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
and was a 5-year plan that took you through 23-24.
Oh,
So I imagine you were engaged in the planning process during that 1819 school year. It was mapped out for 5 years, and COVID came in the middle of that, and things changed. So, but I really like the goal areas that are in your strategic plan. I'll mention them for you. They spoke to equitable access, communications and relationships, curriculum and career pathways, student wellness, and student engagement. So you had focus areas and goals aligned with those 5 themes, which are pretty strong themes. So as I think about some options you could discuss and reflect on together, one option is to refresh your current plan. looking at those 5 focus areas in your previous plan. You could look at those in a very focused plan, a very focused way as a board, and do some short-term planning. What do we want to do to advance those goals next year? The second strategy in that area could be to commit to, in a much bigger way, over a year or more, in partnership with your community, engage in a long-term planning process. So spend a year with your community, looking at those goals, what they mean today, and where you'd like to be in those goal areas 5 years from now. That has a different kind of work plan and time commitment for a board that wanted to engage in that process. The other options really align with the idea of, let's set that plan aside and develop new goals and a strategic plan. And again, you could choose to do that in a very focused way, just with the board focusing on that for a year, and leading the goals, or engage in a year-long community engagement process where you develop new goal areas that lead to more strategic planning. And a lot of communities recently have been successful starting that process with a project called Portrait of a Graduate, where there's a community engagement and student engagement and faculty engagement process where you really redefine what a graduate of BUUSD knows and can do, and then backwards map from that to your development areas, goals, and strategies. Like refreshing your current plan, that's a big investment of time and resources for the board and the community, which is why I invite you to give yourself permission to say, in either case, no matter where you decide you want to start, we're not quite ready for a big community engagement process, and we're at a place where we need to work on how we're working at the board level and with internal governance. All are correct answers, but I want to give you permission to think about what size of a step you're ready to take based on your growth trajectory as a board. No matter what option you ultimately choose, ideally you would invite your superintendent and your leadership team to work together to prepare some foundational information for you. Where are we now? At least in relation to those 5 goal areas. Things didn't go as expected in the last 6 years, and we all know that, but good work happened, and it's always good to start from the current state and understanding your strengths and potential areas for growth. So one possibility for starting that off is asking your administrative team to give you a review of the current state in your goal areas as a foundation for reflecting on the impact of those activities on students. Not only what did we do, but how are our students doing? And then using that as a springboard for either 1 year of goals or a larger strategic planning process for a longer term. Typically, boards do that in a summer retreat. So you would give your admin time to do some of the work they need to prepare all of that information for you. Some of it already exists as part of your continuous improvement planning and things like that, but there's some organization and collaboration that they could do to help support you with whatever next step you choose to take. I would add that it's my suggestion that boards have a few goals in any given year, 3, maybe 5, not more than 5, and understand that your administrative team will have goals as well. You might charge them with being the leaders of advancing outcomes in student achievement or student wellness, for example. and board goals might fall under the umbrella of board development. How do you continue to work to govern as a best practice board effectively? How do you engage with the community perhaps and improve your systems for communication and community engagement? And of course, you have a role in keeping an eye on student outcomes. So those are 3 potential focus areas for a board goal. You don't have to decide any of that right now, though. I wanted to plant that seed and let you file it in the back of your mind. And as we talk about new concepts and board governance topics, let that percolate and we can come back to that at the end of this evening, or you can come back to it at a future meeting, whatever makes sense to you. So again, my goal is to focus on how you work together tonight as a foundation for future work by the board on goals and a work plan. I do want to make a note on committees now, in the spirit of we have more things to do than we have time to do in the 3 hours. As we get through more time in the evening, we could decide to look at board working agreements, or you might decide you want to have a conversation about committees, or at least a preliminary conversation about committees. If I could be in complete control of everything and have everything go exactly as I wanted it to go, which it never does, my suggestion would be that you do the strategic planning work and the goal setting, and then define how your committees are structured, right? So that the way you structure your work is aligned with your goals. Not always a perfect process, but we can talk about committees tonight, or you can decide that you want to wait a little bit and have more clarity about your goals, and then decide what roles committees could play in advancing that work in the coming year. So we're gonna start in a circle. One of the things that I'd like to do with the board, and I think the board found effective last time, is to spend a few minutes really intentionally working to create the conditions for people to do their best work. And that means practicing strategies where everyone can share their thoughts and perspectives and everyone has a chance to be heard. So we'll start in a circle. And then we're going to spend some time reviewing the district quality standards, which is one of the new requirements that is coming our way effective July 1, 2025, and will need to be in your work plan next year. The rules require that all boards and districts create complete a self-assessment of how you're doing in relation to the quality standards. The AOE hasn't told us how that will happen or when it will happen. So it will be difficult to pencil in exactly when you will be doing that in your work plan right now, but it will be useful for you to have some background knowledge about what the district quality standards are and how you're performing in relation to them. And potentially that's a source of goal setting for board development, since you're accountable for being great at all of those things as a board. We'll review some law and regulation type stuff, open meeting law, Robert's rules, FOIA or public records requests. We'll talk a little bit about public comment because those are all things you asked about. I have an opportunity for you to reflect on your working agreements and norms as potential evidence of how you're doing in relation to the district quality standards. And of course, I want to end by giving you some time to brainstorm possible next steps. I see that as a brainstorming, not a decision-making period, but I'll take notes and share the notes from your brainstorm back with Joanne and Michael as a foundation for continued conversations about where you might go from here.
Do you have an estimated time for when you'd like to break for dinner?
I was thinking 6 o'clock, unless people want to do, I mean, if you are starving and that's a distraction.
6 o'clock sounds good to me.
Okay, great. So I would like to start in a circle away from this table. For anybody who's watching online, I'll tell you that it will not provide, this activity is not optimally accessible through the OWL, but I want to assure everyone that this is a learning activity, not a decision-making or discussing the business of the board activity, which is okay to not have in the context of an open meeting law. But any important ideas, I'm sure the board will bring back to the table and discuss them as part of decision-making if it's relevant. What I'd like to ask you to do is maybe some people sit on the couch and see if we can kind of create a small circle there, turn some chairs and group up. All right. Anybody familiar with restorative circles? Hey. My son have had a micro introduction with me. I'm going to give you my ultra abridged introduction to restorative circles. And ask grace from anybody who's an expert in restorative circles. In the interest of time, I want to go quickly. So I like to use restorative circles because they are a great tool to use to practice allowing all voices to be heard and to practice good listening skills. And we use them in schools as part of teaching and learning, and we use them in schools to support climate and fixing social issues, problems that emerge between and among students and groups of students. They're also used in the world of justice. Turn my page. For me, the purpose is to practice and help create that safe, respectful learning environment where all board member voices can be heard and we listen well to each other's perspectives. They're good for sharing experiences, focusing on feelings and impacts, and speaking from the place of I. I find the principles of restorative circles or the practice useful tools that boards can adapt to some degree in board meeting settings for both situations when you're having discussions about ideas or policies, decisions where there are differing opinions. It can also be a really good strategy to use with the community if you're having a community forum or want public engagement around important topics. And it's a tool that you can use to help make sure the community voices are heard and listened to. In a circle, we sit in a circle for face-to-face interaction where there are no hierarchies. That's hard to do at the board table, but in community engagement, it's possible to do that. And in a setting like this, we can certainly do that. We focus on a common center, which is my basket. And we speak to the basket. There's a parallel to that in board meetings, right? The parallel is that we speak to the board chair. Technically, all of our comments in board meetings are supposed to be addressed to the chair, not across the table debate between me and somebody else. Just like you experience at town meeting or any meetings. For circles, we use a talking piece, and this is my talking piece. It's used to ensure that only one person is speaking at a time, to allow for uninterrupted speaking, and those who don't hold the talking piece can focus on listening. In a board meeting, being called upon by the chair is to speak, to address the board, is kind of a proxy for the talking piece, right? Because in a board meeting, you're only supposed to speak when you're called on by the chair. I know boards are more informal than that, but something to think about. When you get the talking piece, you're welcome to respond to the prompt, or you can pass. Or you can just hold it and reflect silently and pass it on when you're ready. In terms of speaking guidelines, I invite you to speak from the heart, tell your story, your perspective, your beliefs about things. The circle is not a place for debate, like in some ways the board table is not, or a discussion. It's just a place for you to share what's on your mind, your perspectives, your experiences, and not respond to other people. Speak to the center. When we're in circles, there are circle norms. And if I was a teacher or spending lots and lots of time with you, we might develop norms together. But generally, they're pretty common, and in the interest of time, I offer this kind of standard list of norms. One is that we respect the talking piece, meaning the person who has the talking piece gets to speak and everybody else listens. Speak from your heart, so tell your truth, your perspective, your experience. Listen with your heart, so really listen with an open mind to what other people have to share. Without necessarily needing to take the time to think about what you're going to say when it gets to you. Give yourself permission just to listen and trust that you'll know what to say when it's your turn. Ask that you speak with respect. To me, that means two things. One, tell your story in a way that's respectful. Language and content-wise, but it also to me means in terms of how you use time, which is also relevant to the board meeting context, right? I often invite educators and people interested in education to speak for the amount of time it takes for a wooden match to learn. So say what you need to say in a concise, somewhat concise period of time, so that everybody has a chance to speak. I learned that is no longer a relevant time reference. Kids are like, what's a wooden match? So you can maybe substitute Snapchat if that works for you. But see, I don't use Snapchat. So, and you live with this set of norms and beliefs. Great. I will put it here just to remind us. All right, so I have some safe and comfortable prompts that I'll ask the group, and then we'll pass the talking piece around. And again, you can share your story, your answer to the question. It can be the same as somebody else's. It can be different. You could choose to pass. You could choose to hold the talking piece for a moment of silence and thought before you just pass it on without saying anything. My first question is in part for me and in part for you. Will you say your name one more time? I know most of them, but I want to know them all confidently. And tell us your favorite class or subject in school, K-12 or pre-K-12, and why it was a favorite. And my name is Tracy, and my favorite grade in school was third grade. And it was my favorite because I really became an independent reader of chapter books in third grade. And I developed my love of the library and have really clear and vivid memories of sitting in a quiet corner of the library, reading all of the Little House on the Prairie books and being very happy to. If somebody would like to start, I can just pass to you if you're ready, but you can.
And, Michael Bootman, it's hard to pick my favorite class. So I will go with, yes, I could say, history. I think it was with Dr. Wilborn. It was a pretty good teacher, and he actually registered me to vote when I was in school.
Juliana Chaganelli. I think you said class, and I was thinking, when you jump to,
Class,
Grade
grade,
level.
subject, whatever.
so I'll vote. My favorite class was physics. Just a lot of things that I learned about different, my favorite was the egg drop. That was pretty cool. And my favorite grade was high school, 12th grade. I think I found myself and, kind of realized who I was. But great.
My name's Emily Reynolds. I think that my favorite grade was maybe freshman and sophomore year of high school. That was a really exciting time for me to feel like a grown-up, get out of Catholic school, and I have such confidence there and excitement. I just remember being young and so busy.
I'm Alice Farrell. My favorite grade was ninth grade because I left the public school, and there's a story behind it. I grew up in Andover, Massachusetts, and when I was going into the ninth grade, my father was transferred to Long Island. Those are what we refer to as the rum years, because 1965, Grumman and Fairchild and all of those were going top speed on Long Island, New York. We moved to a community called Huntington, and Huntington High School had 725 students in a class, not just in school, but in a class. I spent 2 days in Huntington High School and begged my parents to send me back to my grandmother's in Lawrence so I could go back to Massachusetts. And that did not work out. So my mother was a very strong Catholic, and she found a small girls' school that was in a nearby community, and I went to Our Lady of Mercy Academy, Luke's Mercy, for high school. And in ninth grade, one of the classes that was mandatory was Latin. I knew absolutely nothing about Latin and failed it miserably. So at the behest of my parents, this is a strange circle of events, I went to summer school at Huntington High School, where there were 4 students in the Latin 1 class, taught by an older gentleman who was a Latin scholar. He wasn't a teacher, he was a Latin scholar. So I went into the 10th grade having a full understanding of Latin, really loving it, did very, very well. And Sister Mary Marciana, who was the teacher, she's a red head, and we knew because her red hair used to peek out from underneath her habit. And anybody who didn't do well in Latin suffered the wrath, the red-headed wrath. Passed incredibly, so much so that she chased me down the hall on the last day of school and said, "Look, you got a 98 on New York State Regents." And I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean?" And she said, "Well, you're gonna be in Latin 3 next year." So I did. I took Latin 3, Latin 4, read Caesar's Gallic Wars in Latin, and it has just stuck with me. And so, hic hac hoc, and go on with Latin.
I'm Catherine Whalen, and I have been through many different schools, and I seem to have a favorite in each school, in each state that I've lived in, but I'll just pick one, and that was my biology teacher in ninth grade at a high school down in Virginia. And what I liked about her in particular, Mrs. Cox is her name, she was from Maine, was she had such a love of biology that when she came in the classroom, she just beamed every single time. And I would be coming there, it was I think my second period, and first period was algebra. And so I would go to biology and Mrs. Cox would come in and she just always made something fun, something, she always found a student and highlighted something that they did, and she went all around the classroom, no matter, and once she alighted on me because I had drawn a particularly good picture of a leaf. So it was just, I really, really believe in the power of a teacher that loves what they're doing and really cares. And I think that's what drew me to joining this school.
My name is Jeff. Last name is Pete. Elementary school PE, I found myself being very successful. So in all of the years, I wanted to be a PE teacher. I'm like, what do you want to be? Mr. Vogel always set us up cool activities, taught us how to bowl, use the hula hoop, etc. And some of the other points, there was a teacher in ninth grade, Miss Montozo. Her energy, she saw me as a student and as a human.
Thank you, Jeff. Joanne Canning. My favorite grade was third grade because my third grade teacher was my mother's best friend. So that was a lot of fun. And later on, that was actually my first full-time teaching job. I taught third grade and then just really loved it. My favorite teacher, however, was Mr. Farmer. He was my Spanish teacher in high school, and he was the most excitable, enthusiastic, loved Spanish, and I just really got hooked into how cool it was to interact with people of different cultures. So I take his memory with me. I think he just passed away probably last year, but he was just notorious for building relationships with kids and showing his love for his content.
Oh, okay, Jackie Wheeler. My favorite class individually, at first I thought photography, which was in high school, which was black and white, but I have to give a special shout out to the science teachers in high school. I never was a science person, and I hated the biology teacher he ended up marrying the student as soon as she turned 18. So one of those, but then, so then I went, that was accelerated, but I was in the lower level but upper grade chemistry and physics to kind of take it off, and those, I can't remember their names, but they were fun and enthusiastic, and a lot of this has kind of reminded me of that. My favorite grade was sixth grade. It was the last of the special opportunities program. I think my years and then the year behind me was probably the last. It's where they take the gifted kids in the district and they put them somewhere else, and of course right behind me the funding ran out. But until college, that was the last place I belonged. That was the last place a teacher in the whole grade, I mean not including the science teachers and stuff, but that was where our needs were met at an individual level. Did not get that again until college.
My name is Garrett Grant. My favorite year in school was probably my senior year. I got to do so much. I took college classes. We had foreign exchange students from Mexico. I got to go on school trips all over the country. was editor of the yearbook, and I just think about how much all those experiences really set me up for life. I'm so grateful I got to do all of that in 1 year. It's still tired for me.
That's it, go back to fall. I'm Ian Campbell. So I was growing up, we moved around quite a bit, and I would say my favorite grade was probably sixth grade, because that was like the last grade before medical issues started coming up. I have a seizure disorder that really started showing up in seventh grade, but didn't go diagnosed until after ninth grade, so I started having academic problems. But sixth grade was like probably the last good year I had in school. Before I had to like speed run through high school and cram 4 years into 3, after failing the first year. But favorite course probably would have been photography. I did that. After being washed out of ROTC, which is something I really enjoyed. I actually ended up doing black and white photography with a darkroom and set up my own darkroom, and then got a part-time job working at a 1-hour photo lab with the skills I got there. And got to watch that industry die, so it helped help support.
Thank you. Trying to keep this short. One thing about the USD that you're proud of. I can go any direction, we'll start somewhere else in the circle. You ready?
It is an incredibly welcoming school district.
I am so proud of all the passion of our teachers and staff. Every single one I run into is just oozing with love for their job.
So I am most proud of the tenacity of everyone involved in the district. The passion, but the heart they put into it.
And I love the passion of the students that I've met, everyone from kindergarten to grade 12. Anytime that I interact, they're very open and interested to try to still understand what a superintendent does and have some great questions. So I think we have a really wonderful student population.
I'm proud to be on the board during this current tumultuous time at the federal level and the state level. And I know there's a lot of hard work ahead, but I am proud to be on the board. It's going to do a lot of that hard work for students.
Can only pick one. So I'm going to say, I think that the BUUSD program. I'm very proud that the entire district is the center of community. That people of all ages, people with children, people without children, grandparents, all think of the school as part of their life. If you've ever been to, I often take tickets at the hockey games and you see who passes through the door. We are definitely the center of community.
I am most proud of our students.
That's right. But I'm
To be the same.
gonna be selfish and say I'm very proud of my kids and go into, I am very proud of all our students. Every day I see students and they're very excited about what they're doing and the people they interact with.
I'm gonna say that I'm proud of our district for the hard work that it's done in the past to consolidate our schools. And acknowledge that we do got more to go, but I'm very proud of where we've been.
What's one thing you enjoy about board service? What's that?
I'm just hearing all the stories from students and staff.
Yes, staying up to date and staying involved. Um, and, yeah, staying up to date, helping people.
And I'm really proud of the progress that you guys have made this year. As I have said to you before, we're not where we need to be, but there has been progress. And for me, that's really great and fun to see. And I have a lot of hope that we can continue to solidify ourselves as a team going forward. And I feel a lot of hope.
I'm really enjoying learning, the learning curve I'm on, what I didn't understand about what boards do, and yeah, learning all the fine details of that important work.
I've enjoyed learning as well. I think there's definitely been a lot to learn. And coming into my second year now, I'm most excited about how I can fit skills I have, and what I can bring to the board to work in the best way for the school district.
I like to think that I can bring my life experiences and career experiences and family experiences to the district and move it in a direction that it needs to go by both looking backward to go forward.
I'm looking forward to this moment right now, this new year with this group. Feels like a very positive new start to being on board, and I'm looking forward to having an opportunity to learn and develop in a safe space that's not reactive. So
Community service, community input, and the rockstar status of the council.
Something you enjoy about board service.
I appreciate and enjoy hearing about the things that are changing within our district that are in a positive direction.
So I have three more. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Thank you. Take care.
For me, it's just, well, aside from the groupies, just the ability to learn, recognize that the things that I thought, the abilities that I had that I thought were useless, actually are things that I can get back. But mostly the groupies.
So I have three more questions. I can do just one of them, and then we can break for dinner, and I'll give you a dinner assignment. That be good? Okay. So the last question I'll ask is, this mini retreat this evening will be a success if?
You don't leave here alive.
We need a ride.
It will be a success if we, leave here with some ideas for what comes next.
I think, first of all, those are fantastic socks. You're right in my basket here. I believe this will be a success if we are aligned in our goals.
I think we will leave here with success if we collectively feel like this was time well spent.
I don't know how to say what I'm gonna say, so I'm gonna pass for this moment.
in addition to all the other good input, I would also say I think it would be a success if we can leave tonight with an idea of a plan that we can work on.
Thank you. This is mine. If we can't come out with a plan, that would be difficult for me, so we need to leave with a plan.
I kind of think tonight already is a success, but I am looking forward to learning new skills and collaborative ways of being.
That we better understand each other.
I believe it will be a success if we learn something.
I believe it will be a success. Well, that echoes some, it's already been a very nice, successful meeting, and so far so good. I do feel some urgency to talk about the uncertainty of the future. I would like to, I feel very more successful if we at least had a productive conversation around that, because I'm feeling uncertain around that. So that, thank you.
I'm gonna close the circle with a quote and then leave with dinner assignment. So the quote is, if you want something you've never had, you must be willing to do something you've never done. And that was from Thomas Jefferson. Your dinner assignment is to think about two things and to connect with two other people on the board to share these two things and hear what their response is. What's a strength that you bring to the board? And what's a support that you need from other members on the board? Okay? So as we have some informal time, connect with two people, share your strengths, and share something that you need as a support from your colleagues on the board. Okay? All right, let's eat. As people, feel free to keep eating cookies and getting beverages and taking care of your needs throughout the evening. As we turn back into the group, into the work, is there anything anybody wanted to share that they learned during the dinner discussion? Something surprising, something affirming, something interesting, something new?
Do we need the elephant or not?
No elephant.
No
This is
elephant.
elephant free.
But I learned that CVMC still uses pagers.
Oh,
Well, so much for the elephant in the room.
Yes. Which in this day and age is surprising.
Any other new learnings? Interesting? I learned you had somebody with some marketing expertise on your board. I think that's a valuable asset. All right, we're gonna turn into the district quality standards, which I handed out to you. The district quality standards are part of the comprehensive set of rules for how we operate our schools. There are more sections to it. You may hear mention of the education quality standards, which is another section of the rules, which are standards about requirements for how you meet curriculum, staffing, and things like that. Special ed rules are part of the State Board of Education rules. There's rules on student discipline, all kinds of things, educator licensing. But we're going to focus on the district quality standards, which relate most closely to the work of the board. I do want to highlight for you, just so you know, the things that might be in the self-assessment that you will be asked to do at some point this year in some form, all TBD. So the district quality standards speak to our business operations practices. I'm just gonna flip through the headings real quick, and this is yours to keep, so. As far as budgeting and accounting practices, risk management and internal controls, so that's a little bit about insurance and then the practices you have within your system to try and prevent fraud or misuse of funds. Personnel management, data management, facilities management, facility safety. I'll pause there and say that your administrative team should lead you on all of those pieces of the district quality standards. As we look at page 7, the governance standards, governance priorities, governance protocols, and governance processes, those are for you, and we're going to spend a little time on those, because they're primarily about how you work together as a board and what you work on. And I do want to point out at the end that much like the review processes and the accountability processes we have around the education quality standards, where the state reviews the extent to which each district is meeting those expectations, and it's reported on our websites, or at least on the state website, think the school report card, how we're doing in relation to those. These new district quality standards will be reviewed in a similar process, details TBD, but it's going to be reviewed. The results of what you submit for your self-assessment will be published on the website, and there'll be some system of, everybody submits their data every year, and then every third year or more frequently, if you're not meeting them in a satisfactory way, there's a more intensive intervention by the agency, which could include a corrective action plan and some technical assistance. And just as is the case with the other parts of the education quality standards, if after a period of remediation and support, you haven't fixed it, there are some additional enforcement mechanisms. The most serious being, well, continued technical assistance, state board adjustment of your boundaries, or forcing you to merge with another district, closing schools and requiring the district to pay tuition, or the state board or the agency of education could take over your school. In my 35 years as a public educator in Vermont, I've never seen any of those things happen. I'm pretty sure there are situations where it's been close. And in my opinion, based on the little bit I see, that doesn't jump out to me as a concern for Barry right now, but that's what the rules say. So it is important that we pay attention to these. The VSBA worked with the Agency of Education to craft the district quality standards. And I'd like to invite you to spend a little time with the governance standards, which are summarized just on this one pager. So you can take the big set, put it in your file. I'll tell you right up front, more and more boards are creating, or districts are creating board guides or board books. I basically created one for myself, for you. And so this long version of the DQS is in there in a section of my book, and I have other resources that you might consider being part of your standard set of resources that you'll draw upon as board members as we go through the night. So you're welcome to spend more time on this, either individually, or you could choose as a board to say, we need to dedicate some time to really diving into these, understanding what they mean and deciding how they're going to guide our future work. Possibilities for you to decide on. For today, I want to dive deeper into what they say. The VSBA developed a self-assessment tool, and this was a couple of years ago when the DQS was still in draft form and before they were finalized as rules. And this might be something like what the agency asks to have each board complete about as their self-assessment on an annual basis. Might be something different entirely, but we're gonna start with one. And what I'd like to ask you to do is to break into 3 groups. And each group look at a section of these governance standards. So it means if you're in the group that takes governance priorities, reading the overall standard and then the substandards, so 113.1 and then the substandards 0.11 through 0.14. And I'm gonna give you some chart paper and some markers. And what I'd like you to do is brainstorm some examples of what you would see in a district that's demonstrating these standards. And if you're up to it, you can do a T-chart, examples, and on the other side, non-examples. So if a board or a district was not demonstrating this, what is some evidence we might see of that? A second group will take the protocols, and the third group will take processes. I can have you count off by 3. Yeah? Will you start, Michael?
4.
3, 1, 2.
3.
1, 2.
All right. I'm gonna give you, I have in my bag somewhere. Over here. I have sticky chart paper. I would say just be careful about where you can even lay it on the table if it's easier.
Use this, you can use the 2 doors, you can.
Yeah, the doors look good.
Yep, 3 doors
And
actually.
these shouldn't bleed through, but be careful and respect the space. So grab a pack of markers, a piece of sticky paper, and I'm gonna start you with 10 minutes and see how far you get. My goal at the end would be for you to be able to report out a quick summary about what's in your section and the examples and non-examples you came up with.
And our sections are 1, 2, 3.
Yes, oh, good clarification.
Thank you.
2.
Where is it?
It's cold in here.
It's cold in here.
Three, I need a 1.
Where do we go?
I'm glad you said I was.
You wanna go to?
Okay.
Michael, head of the weight. Wait, let's go, Michael.
Yeah, Michael's over here.
Michael, you're what, Mike?
I guess so.
3 over here. 1, 2 over there.
All right.
2 over there.
What's that number 2?
Right there.
That's it, it's all ready.
All right. Support continuous improvement and monitor student. So like, a good district that adopts visions and measurable goals.
That sounds good. We just have
Her suggestion was that if we're gonna do these, we could talk about them as what would encourage to be an example, strongly agree or disagree, or what would be non-example. So depending on this, the first one says the board follows the inclusive process to invite and incorporate community input into the vision and goals of the students. So where do y'all think that the board follows the inclusive process to invite and incorporate community input?
So I would agree, but
Cool, what's your example?
I think even though I
Want to try
don't.
Like, just take notes.
I think that during our board meetings, we do allow public comment, even though I know I've gotten some criticism on it. There seems to be a push within districts to completely get rid of public comment.
Public comment at meetings.
I don't know if that's really,
Okay, so like one example of yes is that, yes, we do have public comment board meetings.
I mean, that's what I think,
Yeah.
but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, it's not, we're just brainstorming.
That's a sketchy.
Just grab that chair and pull it over the wire.
Yeah.
Oh, I almost did you.
As long as it's solved, so.
Wide range of methods to advertise what we do.
Okay, can you tell us, get a little bit more to the methods?
Yeah, we use social media, we use newspapers, we use
Methods to get really. Okay, so the methods of supporting students.
right.
Tracy's my boss.
And board meetings.
That's what you're referring to? I just want to make sure we're on the right track.
Social media, newspaper, word of mouth. Yeah.
And other,
Yeah, et cetera, et cetera. What we do.
so I think multiple methods of incorporating meetings and other houses.
Right, so that would be why I would. There's multiple methods to keep people informed of what's happening, and then we have the public comment, board meetings, and we also, I believe, are very welcoming at school events, community dinners, concerts, things like that.
By the way, did everyone sign up to read in Berrytown this week? I said, and by the way, to Alice's point, have you guys signed up to read to the kids at Berrytown?
I have not.
You got an email from Shannon inviting you.
Must have been today.
No, it was not last week. Sunday.
Oh, was it during the school?
You can't go.
I was like, no, and maybe that's why I like. Reading to the students is a pleasure. Okay, so 1.1, we say we mostly agree that there's some community input. Right? What about aims aiming at the board sets measurable goals and regularly reviews the progress toward those goals? Okay, say more. So 1.2.
You have to go back, a few years and say that, I'll go back to the Act 46 merger and say that it has just been, there have been so many other things to do. And then we fell off the COVID cliff,
Act 46 merger.
They needed
it was just overwhelming.
So the question though, is at least aiming the board sets measurable goals.
And they have, no,
Or is it board?
So we haven't actually set any goals, but we probably should have set some
Act
goals.
46 merger was overwhelming.
overwhelming, yes, but it continues.
So hot, please.
Then COVID came along,
Okay.
then you had leadership issues, I'm just summing up the leadership issues. Goals and what else we do.
Accomplish.
I mean, we have.
Okay, made any goals? Made any goals? Or, so accomplish goals, made any goals, or
Review.
Annual review.
I don't have many thoughts on these two subcategories. I've not been a part of them, so I I had a lack of information, so instead of providing my thoughts, it's.
Well, see that?
Here, what you get. Yes. Do you have anything else?
The thing is, I've been around since I was on the Berry Town board, and Berry Town was a separate district. So that takes someone with that perspective, longevity perspective to know that.
Yes, it
I
does.
just found out in the last 20 years, we have not made it.
So, I'm ready.
I want to frame to think not just about what you've done and not done, but in that strategy.
Oh, like what could? Oh, I just thought we were self-evaluating. What do we?
Give yourself a little okay.
So-
Because if you're not, my theory is, if you feel like this is an area where you want to grow and have a goal, well, let's have some common thoughts or some preliminary thoughts about where we might grow.
So in that case, 1.3. I would say that would be, the board would decide what they're looking for academic progress. You know, what does that look like? Are we looking at tests? Are we looking at?
Can I just go back to one point under it?
Sure.
You like what Teresa said? In order to be, to do more, the board needs to have some training in how to establish goals, how to monitor them, and how to do it.
To train the board to establish.
Review, establish and review.
And then monitor and
And
monitor.
monitor, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, last year was a little different.
Because if you have people all coming together that don't know how to do that, you're certainly not going to make good goals.
I have an idea about 1.3. And I think 1.3 and it does read as monitor student academic progress and wellness. I think we could at least take baseline data, like collect data to see where we're at with student wellness and student outcomes. Like, go ahead and figure out how we can take that temperature, take the data, so we can see where we're at
It's
now.
always there, so you just need to see it, the board needs to see it.
Okay, well, wellness is one of them.
And there's 2 reports that have to file, the district has to file the agency of education every year. And that is one of the,
Student wellness.
well, one of the things in the report is your average daily membership. And he has a low average daily membership.
You're talking about student absenteeism or student attendance?
Yeah, student attendance.
Okay.
So we have to file your attendance records, with the agency of education. And that is the precursor. Looking at how many of absenteeism, why is it, are they sick, are they hungry, are they, you know, all of those things. So the baseline data is there, it's how the board uses it.
I think wellness though is a little bit broader than just whether they're at school or not. I think wellness could also be like how they feel about their experience in school. And asking them, like providing a survey for students to fill out anonymously would
That's all
be,
part of PBIS.
that is a part of PBIS. And I think that for us to, she said like it created like how are we gonna monitor student academic progress and wellness. I think providing surveys or providing students and, student, I guess that's what's not. It's focused on students, their outcomes and their wellness, right?
Yeah, well, part of it is, the PBIS only, really focuses on wellness and, social issues.
Yeah, I would definitely say that that's part of wellness, right? Like data on student wellness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I would say collect and use.
I mean, I don't want to, let's say,
Because if you just collect it, it's a box.
Well, I agree. We have to like look at the data and like analyze it. and then make decisions.
Yeah, so that's easy. Collect because you use that.
To inform decisions,
for goals.
to inform goals. I'd be on student wellness to inform goals and decisions. Okay. And then what's the piece that said monitoring student academic progress?
That's.
That's why.
All that, whatever, if you do the
It's just like one day.
But they should.
That's what her, director of curriculum instruction is collecting that data constantly.
Correct me if I'm wrong, they were at the board meeting, that's a great presentation, right?
Right.
Okay, so can we add that as an example, that is one way we are doing, like what we're supposed to? Is that the board gets presentations from the curriculum directors?
Right, yeah.
Is that in your memory, too much?
Probably we should talk about how it can be digested nicely. And how we can compare it for year on year.
So reporting understandable data on academic progress.
This is 1.3?
Yeah.
Could you rephrase what you just said? It's about the student monitoring academic progress?
So reporting in an understandable
Right. Because the last one you gave us was really well, right?
Regardless of who's on the system stays the same. The director of curriculum instruction, the principals, probably. No.
Curriculum's always a weird word.
Yeah, that's all right.
Curriculum director, curriculum presentations.
Presentations. Principal reports.
Slash principal reports.
That's ongoing. Progress, academic progress. And I'd like to just put together curriculum and like it as understandable manner, because academic progress data can be blindingly, ununderstandable.
Comprehensive.
It's very simple, it's just in an understandable manner, in a manner that both the board and the public can understand.
Layman's terms? Or?
Okay.
Okay, 2 minutes, wherever you are in 2 minutes is good. 2 minutes to wrap it up.
Layman's terms.
Yeah.
Chart.
Yeah, okay. 1.4.
Oh, I think it was,
Superintendent performance.
No.
Based on you've got to do that by, it's just doing it and probably the best way is reaching out to the.
Yes, I was. But the first thing, when we did it, we have done it in the past, I don't think we did it with this. Was they have to come to an agreement with this, with district leadership, how they would like to be evaluated. So that's a really good, the board and the superintendent set the conditions for evaluation.
So they're set the conditions for evaluations, the board and superintendent.
so is this something we're currently doing?
Or this one is good board.
Conditions, for administrative
That is
evaluation.
beyond my capabilities. I can give you a report.
Okay, wherever you are, wrap up your current thought.
A non-example of that. And then, of course, do the evaluation. And the example of the non-example is ignore it and don't do it.
Here's something.
It's like a,
Would you an evaluation? Oh, ignore evaluation.
yeah, not the actual.
Just let
I
it
think, I do think that directors
There's
of
an instance.
and perhaps classroom teachers.
Okay, stay where you are.
Because,
Classroom teachers would love to come provide input to show you how to rate your kids.
Yeah.
yeah,
Stay where you
that's
are, on your
the
feet.
steps you have to, well, follow through the end of the annual report that comes from the director.
Oh, for sure. These are just brainstorming, like pie in the sky, like what could we be doing? I think that'd be
All right, we're gonna start with,
Concern about, no.
I'm gonna start with group 2. The governance protocols group. And the standard for governance protocols is that the board of the district adopts reviews annually and revises as needed their operating protocol for how it does its work, and annually reads foundational documents. And I'll just summarize the elements so you don't have to do that. That means that includes a board annual self-assessment of its own performance, including the extent to which you follow your agreed upon protocols, processes, and policies. Annually reviewing how your actions and contributions impact your school system's success in meeting your goals. Annually evaluating the effectiveness of community engagement and public communication. And undertaking your own board learning and development and provide opportunities to members for ongoing training to support and maintain and increase their skills and understanding. What were some of the examples of things you might see in a district that's doing that?
Okay, so for 2.1, it's the board annually assesses its performance, including adherence to agreed protocols, processes, and policies. That would look like periodic self-reviews. That would not look like posting, we did it on Front Porch Forum.
Yeah. So for 2.2, the board annually reviews whether and or how its actions and contributions have impacted school system success in meeting goals. That would look like an annual review of the metrics during special meeting, basically impact of self-assessment. And what that doesn't look like is basically making Delcor famous, but not intentionally.
The governance protocol annually evaluating effectiveness of community engagement and public communication efforts would look like well-attended meetings, active public comment, and a specific community engagement plan or a communication plan. It would not look like accusatory and disrespectful discourse on Front Porch Forum or in a public meeting or anywhere else.
Awesome.
And we talked about undertaking its own continuous learning and development. That looks like this, like having regularly scheduled retreats and training opportunities together, also individually. It doesn't look like refusing to engage or having a forum or like members at Festos. It's a bad sign. And then we kind of put some, like mindsets at the bottom here, like it would look like an annual focus on revision of foundational documents, It would not look like saying, no, this is the way we've always done it, there's no reason to change.
13.3 governance,
Yeah, very good.
Having heard that, anybody have anything that jumps to mind as, oh yeah, and this is another example, or something I've seen in another system that I think is a good example? Great. We'll skip to governance processes. The overarching standard is that the board establishes and follows inclusive, transparent, and predictable methods to conduct its work.
Okay, so for the first one, the board discusses, adopts, and revises policies on a regular basis to ensure the system is supporting and meeting the needs of every student. We said that it looks like an annual policy review plan, or even more frequent timelines. And what it doesn't look like is any out-of-date policies. For the second one, the board ensures its annual budget aligns with its stated priorities and provides an equitable distribution of resources to help meet the needs and goals of every student. We said that looks like having clearly stated measurable goals and metrics. And it does not look like making it a partisan debate. The board ensures its members are aware of conditions set forth in negotiated agreements and contracts. We said that it looks like having good communication on when the contract is posted. Board members should read it, given opportunities to ask questions. It does not look like lack of full board participation. Let's see, the board ensures its members understand and comply with Vermont statutes and regulations relevant to board work and public education. We said that looks like communication from the superintendent and trainings, and it doesn't look like us being out of compliance or breaking the law. And then we did get to the other ones, but I guess a way of maintaining ongoing relationships with local elected officials is to have a member of the legislature.
Anybody have any thoughts of additions to that list?
Yeah, and we do have an annual, at least an annual legislative breakfast.
Right.
We could add to that, but that's certainly what exists right now.
It can often be useful to dedicate some time on a board agenda right after the session ends. And after you get that final report from VSBA, VSA, VPA of the summary of the legislative session, to review that together. Can't tell you exactly when that's gonna be out, June, maybe July. Even in the best of years, they need a little bit of time between the end of the session and putting together a comprehensive, thorough, thoughtful, here are the outcomes of the legislative session and what it means for you, but putting that on a regular board agenda could be a strategy.
Emily has.
Yes.
I thought that 3.6 stood out to me too, the board maintains an ongoing relationship with locally elected officials. I thought that presented an interesting shift in some of the conversation we've been having on the board, where we've been saying the superintendent is supposed to be maintaining those relationships. So for me, I thought that was a really interesting switch of saying it's actually the board's, the board should take that on. Probably in connection to the superintendent, but we definitely were putting more of the emphasis on the superintendent to do that.
Nice observation, thank you. Any other thoughts? All right, group one, which just needed a little more time. Your standard is around governance priorities. The district adopts a vision and measurable goals to support continuous improvement and monitor student academic progress and wellness.
Well, always you should have time for public comment at board meetings. That is really extremely important because that's how you reach the folks from the community and the schools. The inability to accomplish those goals for whatever reason, the Act 46, leadership issues, COVID, for all of that, you need to make sure that that is in the past now. COVID's over. We don't seem to have any leadership issues right at the moment, and we need to be able to accomplish, a good district would put those aside, move forward, and accomplish the methods of informing people through multiple methods of community meetings, front porch forum, the website, whatever you can to draw people in, to let them know not only what's going on at the board meetings, but also what's going on in the schools, open houses, band concerts, sports games, whatever it is, bring that in to the community. Annually, the board sets measurable goals and regularly reviews the process. You gotta train the board to establish and review and monitor those goals. You shouldn't just make goals a bookshelf issue. Yes, we've made our goals, thank you very much, we're moving on. And the way to not do that is to just avoid it, ignore it. Ignore evaluation, ignore writing goals, ignore whatever goes with it. And you certainly don't want to do that, because it takes away the whole foundational purpose of a board.
That's a really good point. You want to jump in?
Okay, yeah, you can do that.
You're good. No, those are really great points. We don't want to ignore the evaluation. And like, we really do need trainings to be able to establish and review and monitor those goals. Like, I need the trainings too. And I recognize you have a lot of information about like where we've been with Act 46 and how that was kind of stifling of us being able to accomplish, make, and then review the goals as well.
Yep.
So that's important, things I didn't know about. But for 1.3, it basically describes how the board would kind of observe student progress in academics and also student wellness. So some things we are doing well is at the December board meeting or January board meeting, we had the director of curriculum and school principal have a wonderful visual display of where we were at the beginning, middle, and toward the end of the school year. So we were able to see that progress, and we do think that's on the example side. We do want to continue seeing that. I put it at, pie in the sky, say, hey, what could it look like? I say, also, invite classroom teachers to go talk about student wellness or student growth and progress in their classrooms. And finally, we did say, like, there was something right here in the middle that was not an example or not an example, it was an idea. We could collect baseline data on how student wellness is right now. Alice mentioned that PBIS systems in our schools has maybe one angle into that. We could potentially give a survey to students to see how they're doing regarding wellness.
It's very important to provide all this information, not only to the board, but to the community as well. It should be in layman's terms. It has to be an understandable language, because if you're just repeating cold data, it comes out as gobbledygook and nobody understands it. So you have to put all this in real time, real student, real work language. And then collect that data, and the underlying factor is to use that data to inform up above those goals and decisions. And then as far as the superintendent's evaluation is, you have to do the evaluation. Any district that overlooks it is out of their league. Yeah, they're missing the mark. And a non-example is that many districts do. They just ignore the evaluation. They go on from one year to the next, just presuming that everything is okay until they find out that that there's some major problem and that has been going on for years. And it's like, ooh, we didn't know that. And the reason they didn't know it is because they ignored the evaluation.
Michael, what are we missing?
Anybody else? We have additions from the,
I don't know if this is, I just wanted to add to the monitor student wellness. I'm getting to the why, and it's Mr. LeBlanc, this person, it's all like, but like the students do this, and like you pointed out, the teachers do this, so I think that looks more like us welcoming students and teachers to just tell us what they're doing, and I think we'll learn more about that. I like that, thank you.
yes,
For me, the most important part of this governance priorities is that those first words through an equity lens. So what about this is with equity in mind? Alice, you talked about plain language, that's through a lens of equity. I would like, I think as a board, we should spend some time talking about what an equity lens looks like and how we define that, because that didn't really come through for me, that equity lens.
and it came up in this discussion as well, when we're talking about budget allocations, how do we make sure resources are allocated equitably, and potentially some interest in conversations about how do you figure that out? What do you need to know? What does it mean when it comes to resource allocation for kids?
One thing I can add to that with regards to the equity lens is like, there's a committee that I'm involved in at the hospital, and whenever we're creating communications that are going out to the community at large, we have made a point to put everything into an 8th grade reading level. Because that's the only way to make sure that everyone in the community can read it and understand it. So that's something we make a very clear point to do.
There's a couple of strategies that came up in multiple groups that might serve as a thread if you decide that any of these are areas for growth or development for the board in the future. And one of them was the idea of a communication plan with clear goals for the communication plan, audiences, methods, who's responsible, when is it happening, what are the main talking points. And that can be for the overarching year, or it can be for specific issues, like you could have a communication plan just for budget. And equity in that, for example, could include making sure it's accessible to all kinds of reading levels. Another one that came up across was the idea of a community engagement plan, just like with communication, there can be value in being intentional about, beyond public comments at board meetings, what are our intentional strategies for making sure we reach out and hear from the community? And there's lots of possibilities for that, like dedicating a board meeting to be more like a legislative testimony session, where you invite the community to come in and tell you what their hopes are for their next budget, or what equity means for them, or what their goals, what are their priorities, and what do they think you should be focusing on in terms of student wellness, if that ends up being a focus area. So there's strategies, and you can articulate clear plans for those that cover a year or even multiple years if you decide for those to be focus areas for you. So thanks. Questions or closing thoughts about district quality standards as a tool for thinking about growth and development as a board?
Well, the board always has to be looking forward. If you don't, you're not going to grow. And so to just say, oh, we're doing fine right now, our student outcomes we're happy with them, but what would make us happier? What would make our parents happier? What would make our students happier and more successful? So I think that's really important, is to not get mired down in the minutia of now, but constantly be on the lookout for the future.
Mm-hmm. I agree. To me, it's like tending a garden, and you're never done, right? You're constantly weeding and replanting and fertilizing and maybe redesigning the garden. It's constant, ongoing work. Yes?
I think it's important, as we consider this, setting goals, achievable goals, and then we can really measure our progress. I think that's a really important for this group to, to be focused and stay the long course is that goal setting has to be specific and attainable.
Yeah, and so that's where when I opened it, I said, you can do a short term, like, let's figure out a year, or you could do a bigger, long-term process. I come back to, what are you ready for right now as a board? What can you handle between and among yourselves, and what are you ready to bring to your full district? And all the answers are right, you just have to pick the one that's most right for you, based on where you are. So I'd like to bring you back to the table. And I want to spend some time on information related to governance protocols, standard 113.21. The board annually assesses its performance, including to adherence to agreed upon protocols, processes, and policies. And on the second page, 113.24, ensuring your members understand and comply with Vermont statutes and regulations relevant to board work and public education. I'm going to talk a little more for a little bit, so you get to listen. I'm going to talk about, at a high level, high speed rate, open meeting law, public records, and Robert's rules. I'm going to start with open meeting law. I'm just going to send this in two directions, and wherever it lands, it lands.
Tracy, could I also add, if anyone's looking for coffee or tea, if you can make your own at the outside counter right here to the left.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do want a cup of coffee, but
Sure.
Welcome.
All right, so the document I just handed out to you on open meeting law is my document. It's not legal advice. I know a lot about open meeting law because I've had to navigate it as a superintendent with boards for a while. But if you ever have a question about open meeting law, your final and official source is your legal counsel or the Secretary of State's office. You could also go to the SBA. This is my shorthand for it. It's what I reviewed with the Superintendent Search Committee last year when I worked with that body. I would highlight that it's drawn from the link at the top of the page, which is the Secretary of State's website. I'll jump to the end and tell you that Vermont law now requires that the chairs of municipal governing bodies, which school boards are, and their managers, which a superintendent would be, are required to be trained in open meeting law at least once per year. And the video training on the Secretary of State's website is there to help you meet that requirement. I'm sure there's also workshops at the SBA and other settings, but watching the webinar is something you can do. All of you can do. You could do it at a board meeting. You could do it as homework and come back and discuss. It's there. So, at a glance, open meeting law applies to public bodies of the state, which include boards, all of the state's councils and commissions, and committees and subcommittees of these bodies. It now also differentiates between non-advisory bodies and advisory bodies. And non-advisory bodies have supervision, control, and jurisdiction over legislative, AKA policy, quasi-judicial, student and personnel hearings, and budgetary matters. Tax too, but you don't, it's debatable whether you're directly responsible for tax, right? And advisory bodies don't have any of these powers. So the Superintendent Search Committee, which did not have the authority to appoint a superintendent just made recommendations. I considered that an advisory body. But the school board itself is a non-advisory body with the authority to make decisions. So just because something is called a committee, however, doesn't mean it's not an advisory body. So if you give those powers, decision-making or policy-making to a committee, it could also be subject to those non-advisory rules. And we'll talk about what the difference is in just a minute. So when does open meeting law apply? It applies anytime a quorum of the board holds a meeting. A quorum is a majority of the body. And a meeting is a gathering of a quorum of that public body for the purposes of discussing business or taking action. So for you with a board of 9, anytime 5 of you are together discussing school district business or contemplating taking action, that's a meeting. When does it apply? Again, anytime a quorum is present in discussing business. And so that could apply regardless of the physical location. So we're here. So this is a meeting. It doesn't have to just be at the library at the high school. And in fact, the law goes on to say that there's no exceptions for work sessions or retreats. So this is warned as a meeting and is available to the public and being recorded. It's important to note that a meeting can come together over a span of time. It's really important to watch out for email strings, social media discussions, and other serial communications, even things like collaborative editing of documents outside of meetings.
Can I add to this, Tracy? Internally, for the new folks, we've decided that if an email goes out or a text message from me, do not reply all, reply specifically to me. And that will help us stay out of that domain.
Good call.
Yeah. Meetings don't include just basic communications to schedule meetings, organize agenda, or distribute materials to discuss at a meeting, right? So your packets to go with it. But I've also seen boards that will say, we're going to be discussing our policy on grading. And I'm opposed to that policy, so I'm attaching 3 pieces of research that I'd like to share with you all for discussion at the upcoming board meeting to the full board. I would argue that that leans into the discussion in a serial way outside of the meeting. And that's another good opportunity to lean into your superintendent and board chair. If you have things you want to share, send them to that individual and they can send it to the full board without editorial, or discuss with you ways to share the information you might want to share. That makes sense. Okay. Collective bargaining, just so you know, is excluded from open meeting law. And social gatherings, conventions, trainings, media events, you know, if you all decided to go to the select board meeting or the municipal town meeting, those are all fine for you to attend, provided you're not taking action or discussing business of the body. You're welcome to be there as individual citizens. It's advised that you make efforts to not all sit together in a group and be whispering to each other, even if it's about select board business, because people might think you're talking about school board stuff. Question?
But we can go to Gusto's.
Oh, you can.
If we want.
You can go to
As
Gusto's.
long as we're not talking about board business.
That's right.
Just pointing that out.
That's right.
So, where it says, the social gatherings, conventions and trainings,
Mhm.
our retreat could be a training and sidestep the
Yes.
process that we're in right now.
If it was pure training,
Yes.
or you all went to the VSBA conference or a VSBA in-person training, that would be all true. Based on what you told me you needed, Joanne and I weren't comfortable saying that this is
Yeah.
gonna be all just teaching and learning, so we're doing it this way.
Better safe than sorry.
All right. So when you're having meetings, there are some requirements. You need to give advance public notice. I know you've already done this. You have a resolution or took action to set your regular meeting date, time and place. You need to post and make an agenda available 48 hours before each meeting. I believe you have some unofficial agreements about something sooner, but this is what the law says. And there are some additional requirements for special or emergency meetings, which are on the next page, basically. So agendas need to be posted again 48 hours before each regular meeting and 24 hours in advance of special meetings, and as soon as possible before an emergency meeting, which is appropriate only when an unforeseen occurrence requires immediate attention. There could be a safety emergency in the community that has an immediate impact on the school, and you need to be in on the response. That might be an emergency thing. Agendas need to be posted on the website that your district maintains, and the town clerk's offices, and in 2 other designated public places in the municipality. And if anyone asks to be sent agendas, you need to send them to the people who ask them. In my community, the press usually every year made a request, and so I would send all my agendas to them. You have a question?
That statute?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have a question about that?
I do. I will tell you that I noticed that sometimes boards who aren't really familiar with this particular legal requirement might, at their board reorganization meeting, list more places that they want agendas to be disseminated. In the interest of communication, talk to your legal counsel, discuss it amongst yourselves. I would keep my list of official notice places narrower.
Mhm.
And in my communication plan, I might have some additional places that we want to post them. But when it comes to official warning, focus on meeting your legal requirements and not expanding through your own actions what you're required to do legally, understanding that you can do whatever you want to do communication-wise to engage your community, right?
That's what we did this year.
You made a bigger list?
No, we made our list smaller and then instructed that, if you could.
Perfect.
Do we post at the clerk's office?
Yes, we do.
That was on the
We do?
list too,
Yeah.
I remember that.
Okay.
Perfect. So the agenda should address the specific topics to be discussed and potential actions. And as I know you know and do, additions or deletions can be made as the first active business at the meeting. And as Michael did tonight, any other adjustments are fine within the context of the meeting. You can change the order, things like that. Beginning just this last January, decision-making or non-advisory bodies, this school board, and perhaps some committees, depending on the charge, need to do their meetings in hybrid format, so provide the online access. Remote-only meetings are okay for advisory public bodies, as long as you provide for the remote participation of the public as you would for other meetings. Minutes need to be taken for all meetings. They are the permanent record of your business and preserve your history. They're technically kept by the clerk or secretary of the public body. One of you is probably the clerk, but you have like a clerk pro tem or a secretary who's assisting you with the note-taking behind the scenes. They should give a true indication of the business of the meeting, covering the topics and motions that arise. They should include everybody who's present, the active participants, so your guests from the public, as well as you and your administrators and faculty and staff and students who are there to assist with the work of the meeting. The motions, proposals, resolutions, and how they're disposed of. Vote results, and noting individual votes if a roll call is requested. Those minutes should be, I should say, they do not have to be a word for word reiteration of your meeting and who says what.
And if you noticed in the last couple of months, Tina's done a much better job of being able to manage the minutes because she's not doing word for word transcriptions. We were never intended to do that. It's just, as Tracy said, the agenda items, the motions, the votes, and the detail related to that. That's been really helpful.
Get the big ideas, but don't go down the rabbit hole of word for word, I said this, he said that, she said this. All right,
Because people can go back and see the video if they're really interested in every single detail. We recorded it.
draft minutes should be posted on your website no later than 5 calendar days after the meeting. There's actually no requirement in law that you approve draft minutes, but it is a pretty standard practice for people to post the drafts, review them, make tweaks if it's helpful, and then update them with the final copy. But the key is that posting within 5 days, and you need to make them available for inspection and copying on request.
It might change this year.
You think?
Yeah.
Interesting. I'll look forward to learning more about that. And meeting recordings as of July 1st are now required to be posted on your website for decision-making, non-advisory bodies. So your recording should be on your website.
Our recording of this video
Yes,
should be on our website.
yes.
Well, we
They
are.
are a decision-making body.
Yeah, it's
on YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
The
Is there a
links
link
are
on
on
your
our
website?
website,
I'm pretty sure the links
There's
are
no
there.
link.
There is no, are you sure about that? Let me check.
I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure it's not there. I don't think,
There's a link
For
to,
this
that's how
one?
I get to them, is our website.
Yeah, that's
Same
how
here.
I used to get to them too.
I don't.
I
go
can't
through
hear it. What
YouTube.
did she say?
Some
There are-
get them through the website and some go right to YouTube, but it would be useful for you to follow up and see if they're available through the website.
Yeah.
And the other question you could ask, and we'll talk about this in just a minute, and I don't know the answer, is how long do we have to maintain those records? So if your only site to keep them is in YouTube, do you have a way to make sure that you can maintain those and produce those if required through whatever
I'm
period
pretty
you're
sure the
supposed
answer is yes, but I cannot tell you how right now.
Totally understand. All right, so that's for meeting recordings. Executive session. Executive session is a closed portion of the meeting that's not open to the public. You can only have those if the business you want to discuss fits into one of 14 categories in statute, and I have a cheat sheet with those list of reasons for you. And I saw somebody, Michael has a cheat sheet there that I bet has executive session on the backside too. Yeah,
And when the new board members get their manual from VSBA, we will also have that cheat sheet.
great. And you can't take any formal action in executive session except purchasing real estate, which is a rare thing, that you'll probably get a lot of legal advice if you're going to do that. So when it comes to open meeting law, can board members use email?
Can I ask a question about executive session? What about, documents in executive session? Can those be taken or released to the public?
It depends. Right?
Technically, unless it's personnel, I mean, that would definitely be.
I think it largely depends on whether it's a record that is releasable, in part.
The issue, I mean, if we get documents in executive session, we should not be dispersing them. That's the question that you're asking, correct?
Yeah, as superintendent, I would hand them out on paper and I would collect them at the end. If they weren't something I was comfortable with you taking home and accidentally leaving on your coffee table.
I wondered if you could give us a little description of, the confidentiality of executive session and like what that kind of means, because I think we've been in a couple executive sessions where we didn't explain all of the norms and expectations yet. So I think it's around that confidentiality.
Okay.
And like note taking and, you know, things like this.
It's something that you could choose to get legal advice on and do a deeper study, because I'm not an attorney. In my experience, no notes are taken during executive session. And in my experience, it's really important that the board stay on the topics for which you're in executive session. And what is said in executive session stays in executive session.
Because premature public knowledge would leave the board at a significant disadvantage.
It's also just a trust and integrity thing, and it's a part of the way that you demonstrate to the community that you are respectful and professional and follow the rules. And that's how you build trust.
Thank you.
So for email and social media, of course you can use those. They're useful for scheduling meetings, organizing an agenda, distributing materials to discuss at a meeting. But it's probably not okay to engage in group emails involving a quorum of the body, hence reply to Joanne individually or reach out to Joanne and Michael individually if there's something you want on the agenda or something that you think you can add to enrich the discussion, whatever it is. Collective editing of documents by a quorum is not good practice either. Usually you'll delegate authority to someone or maybe two people to work with your superintendent or another designee on that. For example, if you have to write your decision after a quasi-judicial hearing, probably your attorney will help with that. Participation in Facebook groups and front porch forum by a quorum of the body of the board, a quorum of this board if you're discussing business. And that's so hard if people are posting misinformation and you want to respond to misinformation. So if you decide you want to prioritize a communication plan, you could add some really explicit agreements about how you navigate that. You do have some historical resources on how you respond to things like group emails that I'll point out to you. But if you decide to go in that direction and you don't feel you have clarity on that, you can talk about some agreements for who the board spokesperson is, the content that's okay to talk about, what's not okay to talk about, what your ground rules are if you're running for board and people are asking your opinion on X, Y, and Z, how you talk about that if you're already a sitting board member. Serial communications of any kind, so a string of emails that eventually includes a quorum of the board is a meeting and is not okay outside of the view of the public. And any communications or decisions made on behalf of the board that were not delegated or authorized by the board. So you could, for example, delegate one board member to act on hiring over the summer. And they could be emailing with Joanne about that over the summer. That's fine. But absent that delegation, communications or just about decisions or that make decisions, signing the contract yourself for the project you just authorized at the start of this meeting. None of you is authorized to do that individually unless expressly granted, and you should not communicate decisions like that.
Expressly granted, like, that would have to be done out.
Yeah.
But like, let's say, you know, we're interested in purchasing the Allen building right next door to expand parking. We're not going to do that. It just came out of my head, that's all.
Hypothetical.
But, in executive session, we could encourage, you know, someone that may have, like Juliano says, you know, he has a relationship with whoever owns the building. We can say, hey, you know, talk to him, right?
Yes, you could.
But we cannot, going into formal contracts, we would need a board authorization.
I would even for that one, come into open session and take action to authorize Juliana to talk to property owners about possibilities for real estate options in the future. Or
Even if
something.
it's just like discussing
Yep, I
general
would,
things, general.
I would. Anytime somebody's representing the board, they should be authorized by the board
For
to
the
do
full
that.
board.
Yeah, unless you have, I mean, typically it's agreed that the chair is the spokesperson for the board. When the media calls, you're the. When somebody reaches out to you individually and has a complaint or a concern, not sure where to go. Joanne, Michael, those are, those are your fallbacks. Unless you specifically agree otherwise. All right, so the public has a right to attend meetings. That includes getting their agendas in advance, the timelines we discussed. They can be notified directly of upcoming meetings, so if they, in writing, say, I'd like you to send me an agenda, central office has to maintain that list and send them all. And they get to view and copy meeting minutes. They have a right to participate, which means a reasonable opportunity to express opinions on matters considered subject to reasonable rules. I will tell you, and I sense that this is in the history here from historical documents I read, sometimes community members are confused by their rights to participate in annual meetings, like on town meeting day or a special meeting of the whole electorate, where everybody gets to speak and everybody gets to vote, and board meetings, where the primary purpose is for them to be able to observe the work of the board as trustees for the district, overseeing and governing the organization. And in that context, they get a reasonable but limited opportunity to comment. And typically, that's at the beginning of the meeting on agenda items not on the agenda. And after board deliberations, but before a decision on matters to be decided. And that's basically what you have in some of your documents. And I have some resources to help you with that, if that's an area you want to go deeper. The public also gets to.
Can we make that decision to go deeper now? Do we want to make that decision
On specifically what?
on more detail? If no,
Yep.
that's fine. I just, how we should be addressing public comment. Whether or not I'm doing it correctly, I mean,
Yeah.
as technically, I guess, as the board chair, I can do it the way that I've been doing it, but you're suggesting a different way, correct?
I haven't observed your meetings lately, so I don't know, but I can show you what I have for resources. Like, I feel like it's 7:47, I have 13 minutes. I probably have 2 more hours of stuff. So what I think I want to do is finish this. I want to tell you the resources I have for you and let you talk about what you want to do next. So last thing on open meeting laws are required. There's the required training. I mentioned it earlier for superintendent and board chair. The video on the website of the Secretary of State's covers it. You all could watch it individually. You could watch it together at a meeting and discuss it, and then run through scenarios and get an expert in to help you navigate your scenarios. That's a possible go deeper if you want. Want to mention public record. I've alluded to it. It's any written or recorded information, regardless of physical form or characteristics, which is produced or acquired in the course of doing your business. So all of your emails related to school district work, any texts, regardless of which account you use, your personal or private, social media accounts, with a few exceptions, because there's been some recent Supreme Court cases, official documentation that's shared with you, draft budgets, things like that. They're all public records that may be subject to disclosure. So I'm gonna pause there, and I'm gonna give you a bunch of stuff. That if I'd been a better planner of time, we'd have gone through all of them. So if I was continuing, I'd shift gears and I'd talk to you about Robert's Rules of Order. And there are a number of sources and resources on this, including VSBA webinars, VSBA in-person training. There's other organizations that will come in and train you. This is a resource actually from Utah about Robert's Rules. And the reason I liked it is it worked for my learning style in that it told me what the purpose, what we were trying to achieve by following Robert's Rules, which works for me. I need to know why things are the way they are. And the basic principles, and then it runs you through in a nice narrative form, the basic elements of Robert's Rules. And can I look at the back of your page? I like at the end that it has some general rules of debate for small boards that might be useful for this board to review and discuss, and it might cross over a little bit into public comment. I have the resource that Michael has laminated, and I think you've all gotten from BSBA. It's really a resource on executive session. It's useful to have handy because it lists the 14 reasons you can go into executive session. But on the back side, it has a little table with the basic things, the basic actions and motions and things you can make under Robert's Rules. It also has the cheat sheet for motions to go into executive session. So if I was going to create a board book for myself of handy things, this would be in it. So it's kind of the same information now in table form instead of narrative form with a purpose. I pulled for you a quick resource on number 31. On rules for small boards. So you're a small board, which means all of the formality of a large body does not necessarily apply, like you're not required to stand to make a motion. And people don't really tune into this, but knowing some of the things you've talked about as a board, I thought this could be a useful resource. So in this table, it summarizes, I think it's the 6 things that a small board can do. I don't recommend the second one, that motions don't have to be seconded.
Isn't Robert's Rules of Orders for small boards a separate document? That you have the original Robert's Rules, the 700 pages of it, and then you have the rules for small boards. We opted to use Robert's Rules of Order, 720 pages.
So my understanding is there's Robert's Rules, and then there's a sub-component of small boards, and from what I've read, if you adopt to use Robert's Rules and you're a small board, you can use Robert's Rules for small boards. You could check with your legal counsel if you do or don't want to use these. The key to this one for me is that it gives you a little less formality. It allows the chairman to speak in discussion. And it allows things like motions by consensus. There being no further business on the agenda for this evening, does anyone object to me declaring the meeting adjourned? And you can just adjourn without all the motions. So that's something, if you want to, you could study more deeply. I have a deep dive document for you. This is too deep for tonight, but it's from that same source, and it's guidelines for public comment. This goes beyond, this is for Robert's Rules generally, of all kinds of meetings, nonprofits and things like that. So not everything applies perfectly in Vermont. I highlighted some things that I would point out to you if I had time. but I'm gonna offer you that for independent reading if you'd like to. I wanna. Did I not speak? All right.
No, I didn't see any highlighted.
No, I didn't mark yours up.
Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Mine are marked up. Sorry. All right. This, Tina printed for you. It's the list of board policies on your website. No, it's not. It's the list of all of your policies. On your website, there's a section A, board operations. I didn't communicate clearly, and what I wanted was to give you hard copies of the 5 or 6 policies that are there.
Mhm.
Those are the topics that tell you how you're supposed to behave as a board and what you're supposed to do. And they speak to things like complaints about personnel, how you prepare and distribute agendas. There's a notice of non-discrimination, which you need to follow. There's a community engagement and vision policy. There's a policy on the board superintendent relationships. There's a policy on policies, the role and adoption of those. And there's a board member education policy. Those are important for you to know and follow. And if they don't say what you want them to say, you should update them. You also have, on the procedure side, a set of procedures that are board procedures. They include procedure on committees. You had a policy on complaints. You also have a procedure on complaints about students, parents, employees, anything. You have a procedure for public comment. Look at that. And that says public comment on topics not on the agenda, and for items that are on the agenda, any person interested in commenting should hold comments until that agenda item is discussed, and the chair will ask for public comments on that agenda before action is taken by the board. So if you have your discussion, the information is shared, then if the public, because most of the time, a lot of the times that addresses the public's questions and concerns, but there's one more opportunity, an opportunity for them to say, I want you to consider this, or I want you to know that I feel this way about that, and I hope you vote that way, kind of thing. You have a procedure on response to community correspondence, which is always a sticky one, when you can't do group emails, right? And somebody emails all of you. You have a policy on records and document requests, or a procedure. I don't know if I said policy or procedure. What I want you to know about that is if somebody emails you and says, I want the notes from the discussion of, or a copy of the financial analysis for issue X, that's correct. You can send it to Michael. Michael's going to send it to Joanne, or your public information officer, who is Laura Potter, right? So they're not necessarily, they're the keepers of the record for you. And you can send those requests to them. And I wouldn't even say can, you shall, because you're a public official, and if you get something that sounds like a public records request, that's what you need to do. You do offer a form that allows people to do that, but they don't have to do it in a form. They can just do an email in whatever language they use, and you should suss that out and get it to the right person. I'm going to give you the board operating protocols that we developed last summer. And I added to the end your meeting norms. If we had had time, we would have reflected on those. So I want you to have those in case that's helpful for you to think about. And the last thing I want to highlight to you as a resource for you to think about where we go from here is on your board landing page, you have this document, how to engage with the BUUSS board.
How to what?
How they
Engage with the board. So
Okay,
it's that button at the bottom. And this is another piece of evidence that shows me that this board has been working on an ongoing basis about how you interact with your community and how you govern with the board. So the audience for this is the community, but it talks about the way the board works. It's another source of information about how to handle complaints. It also describes public comment in the same way that is in your procedure. It talks about requests for information and formal FOIA requests. It talks about ways community can ask for things to be on the agenda and what will happen when they do. And I told you you had a procedure on committees. You also have a second committee procedure here.
Is it a different one?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. So I don't see, just so you know, that things are in multiple places. Again, it tells me this board has been doing that gardening, right? But sometimes you might not have noticed that you have two beautiful hydrangeas here, and now you're planting some more here, and they're all beautiful, but people don't know which hydrangea they should look at. That's not a great. But you get the gist, right? So I wanted you to have all of that so that you could think about what you might want to do next in terms of how you work together and how you work with your community. And I want to tell you, you can't do it all at once. That's okay. That's normal. Pick where you need to start or where you want to start. There isn't a wrong answer. And come up with a plan to get it done. It's 8:00. Do you want to end the meeting? What I would like to do at a minimum is go around the table and ask everybody for one possible next step, given where your minds are right now, at a minimum. But I'm happy to stay and listen if you want to talk more about possible next steps, or you could put it on a future meeting agenda. Given all we heard and what we did and didn't do, what are people thinking and what do we do next? Yeah.
So that you brought up the two land for the committees, I think that's something we should look at. And.
Could you say that first part again, Julian?
Well, she found two different locations for committees.
That's what I missed about it.
You need to kind of like blend those two together.
Thanks.
Are we just going around the table? Does that work for everybody? I think that putting some next steps on our committee work is probably something that we're ready for. And then like thinking further to a strategic plan or what that looks like, I think that we would need a summer retreat to kind of just keep building on the work that we've started here.
I think we need to choose areas that we want to work in. We have our cleanup work, like the making sure everything's clear on our website and we don't have duplication or redundancies. And then what is most important to us from a board level? Do we organize our goals and objectives? Do we think about writing plans, whether they be the communication, the financial, the facilities, the education, which many boards have an education plan, and pick what is the most important, which is the most valuable, and what will move us forward in an organized fashion. Because that's what my belief is that we've kind of lost our organization in the last few years, and we need to really bring it back. That we're not a casual group, we're a very important and very necessary element for education and school districts. So we need to make sure that we are organized. Pick a point, move forward.
I like that. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I would also like to say, I think that I liked what Tracy had mentioned at the beginning with using the metric to also potentially guide your committees. Because if we have a the metric in place, then that should speak to what committees will facilitate that operating the way that we want it to.
I would agree that the summer retreat would be incredibly helpful. One thing that came to mind was, is there any kind of like tracking? Like, do we have a spreadsheet or revision tracker for the policies and procedures?
We do.
Yes, we do.
Okay, sorry, I know that's kind of
Just a great question.
yeah, because years ago I curated a knowledge base for a company and had a tracking spreadsheet and of like a revision periodically, like, okay, we're pulling this up and reviewing it.
I will say that there was a little confusion about where we were with a policy audit. And I think I tried to explain that to you in my briefing memo, that the previous superintendent said that we were in good shape according to his conversation with Sandra Cameron, and that was not true. So I feel bad for you, Emily, because you received that information and we assumed that was true and it was not. So, you know, Alice, you were a big proponent in the beginning of the year, you know, to have an audit done. And I would highly recommend that we try to get that done before the end of the year. And I'd be happy to work with the SBA to get that underway. But I think that would give us a lot to work from instead of doing the work ourselves.
What would be the timeline on that?
They would need a couple of months. So, you know, if I told them now, it would be, you know, I don't know what other work is in front of them. And it would be a cost. It's like $2,500, but I think once again, it's well worth it. There are policies that are being developed all the time that are required, and we haven't been able to keep up with that, much less the ones that have to be reviewed. And the best practice is every 3 to 5 years.
So, and I was asking because we could effectively have that summer meeting with those results if we do that soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not sure. So I will abstain from comment this time.
Yeah, I definitely want to know what direction we want to move on the committees, because we've had a proposal on how we could switch that up. So, and I also want to know how we want to proceed with the strategic plan, because I think it's really important.
Putting those down. So my kind of impression is that we have some good bones, but we're pretty scattered all over the place. So maybe find a way with the cost, but I feel like if we put these things in order, like my overarching goal would be to have a framework that we could all leave our seats and the next people could come in and it would go smoothly. So like that would be my idea with what we're doing here. So I think the policy audit would help with our strategic plan and our committees. I think public comment might actually be a good idea to move ahead because of the whole concept with communicating with the public. And I think once that becomes clear, understood standard, and it's effective and valued and positive, that's gonna help one big leg of what's been holding this district back, I think, is involving the public. And I think the best use, I think we can start there without having the audit. So we can kind of run concurrently and then have that summer retreat and really drill down with all the information. But I think I like the idea, and I think it's really distracting Michael because he has to leave the board. But having it very clear and fair, and so the public feels that it's fair, just a public commenting policy, I guess, and just really focusing on that in the more near future, and then building on the things that kind of were said throughout would be my idea.
I would just encourage you to pair that with intentional thought about, besides public comment, let's be clear with the community about the other ways that they can give you input.
To include that, yeah.
Yeah. And
Public
when,
input, that
you
would be
know,
a
if
better
it's 2
phrase,
meetings a
public
year, a fall and a spring, and we're just gonna dedicate the whole meeting to listening to you. Come on in, have some spaghetti and talk to us, kind of stuff, for example.
I think we do need to address the policy, or the committee, sorry. I think that's the next step.
I have one more thing. Should we consider, we've currently gone to one meeting a month. Should we consider, not now, not tonight, but after all we've heard tonight, should we consider going back to 2 and how to use that second meeting efficiently and effectively?
I can actually speak to that. We're gonna have to do a couple more meetings in the next couple months, so that's not even an issue. We might have to meet the minimum of twice a month, more than likely. So there'll be special meetings for now, just based on what I think is before us. I think we're gonna have some special meetings.
You know, my question was, should we do away with the special meetings and actually have it as part of our protocol to be 2
My
meetings a month?
question is that, I mean, we already established that it would be a meeting, and then if needed, another meeting, but it's already scheduled. I don't know if that requires a special meeting. I mean, the board is.
committee.
What schedule did you adopt at your,
Once a month,
Once a
Monday,
month.
first Monday.
Second Monday of the month.
First,
Was it the first? Is this the first Monday of the month?
Yeah.
But remember and maybe this won't work for you, but my suggestion was a carousel meeting for the committees, where you would all be meeting on the same site. I could share in those committees. Obviously, that won't work for negotiations, but it could for facilities, finance, and policy.
So that was already an established meeting, so it wouldn't be a special meeting.
the,
the committees though, right?
It would be
Essentially,
more as
we would
the
have to
committee
do the
meetings.
committees.
Right.
which
as
would
part
mean we would have to make sure that they're broadcast, and it could get a little cumbersome on the technical side, so.
Because of the owl, because we don't have 3 owls.
depends on whether they're
They're all,
advisory or decision making.
Yeah. And they've been operating as advisory.
Yeah. Which makes good sense given the topics you're talking about.
Thought you mentioned that the committees are non-advisory, that they would be able to make decisions.
no.
They would make a recommendation to the board, like, we've reviewed these policies, we think you ought to update them and bring it back to the full board, and then the full board is the body that makes the decision. So you have a little more flexibility in those.
Are there non-advisory rules for committee work?
No, this is really a new thing that just was enacted and took effect July 1 of this, or January 1 of this year. So we're gonna all learn it together.
Great.
I will type up this list
You will?
and I will send
Okay.
it to Joanne
Great.
and Michael. I encourage you to think about, looking at those other policies and procedures that I didn't hand out. And on that little cheat sheet that came with your, the board packet this time, there's 3 questions at the end. When something comes to you, it arises and you're not sure what to do about it. These were questions for me. I didn't think we were gonna hand this out, but you've got it. You know, is there a law, regulation, policy, procedure, or other source that tells us who handles this and how? Right? If it's you, how am I supposed to handle it? If it's somebody else, who's the somebody else? It's most likely these 2. If it's not clear who's responsible for it, who's closest to the topic, that's who it goes to. And if you're thinking about whether you want it on a board agenda, the question is, does it relate to the agreed upon board goals? Is it one of our priorities? If not, maybe we put it on the list for someday. Or we have a conversation about what are we not gonna do towards our agreed upon goals, so that we can do this new or different thing. I appreciate being with you again in this lovely space and enjoyed watching your work and think.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
All right, with that, moving on to an adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Garrett, seconded by Alice. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Perfect Robert's rules motion.